Thank you all so much for being here. We are delighted to have you. This is our second session on reframing behavior. This is reframing behavior part 2. So hopefully lots of folks who were here for our last webinar, or hopefully lots of you were here for the part 1 of the webinar. But if not, that's okay too. And we'll do just kind of a quick run through of a couple of things, a couple of reminders before we get started. And so just want to say thank you very much to our partners on the state leadership team for their partnership in this pyramid model work, and also to the Office of Early Childhood in Connecticut, who supports this work through funding. We are very delighted to be here and always love getting to talk to you all about pyramid model. So as I mentioned, this is the second of a 2-part series that we're doing related to behavior. Last month, we really talked about understanding behavior. What is behavior? How does development contribute to behavior? And what do we want to be thinking about as we consider the intersection of behavior and culture, as well as behavior and trauma? So those were a couple of things that we went through last month. Today, we're going to talk a little bit more about some concrete strategies, and we have a number of resources to share that will hopefully also really support responding to behavior in a way that is supportive and helpful and meaningful. And so we're going to talk about shifting really from a reaction kind of perspective to really thinking preventatively. And we're going to talk about adult regulation and some prevention strategies that really include focusing on the relationship. So we're sort of seeing a lot of this conversation about behavior through the lens of the relationship between the adults in the room and the children. And Kate's going to talk more about that in just a couple of minutes. As we get started, we would love to just hear who all we have in the room. And so if you wouldn't mind signing in to the chat with your name and the age of the children who you teach, and maybe a favorite memory from your time in school. And we'll give folks a couple of minutes to sign in here. Great, thank you. So I see all age groups, age 3 to 5, 0 to 5, preschool, birth to 5, all age groups, 0 to 5, preschool. I don't see any favorite school memories yet. Does someone want to share a favorite school memory? Mine was racing on the playground. That's one of the things that I remember from preschool, was running races on the playground. I love that. Playing in the snow on the playground, Liz, I love that. I love that you got to go to school in the snow. I feel like that doesn't happen very much now, right? Currently teach 3s. You always felt safe and seen at school for your gifts and talents. Lisa, that's so beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. Dawn, going to specials, art, gym, and music. That is still the topic of conversation at our breakfast table every morning, is what special does everyone have today and how excited are we? Grace playing on the playground. Kate, the Berenstain Bears book, so good. Love that. All right, thank you. So please, if you have a minute, kind of keep signing in and let us know, who you are and who you work with. Linda, I see, oh, your mom hid behind a tree and all you did was cry. Separation's hard. Drop-offs are hard on both ends, right? It was probably hard for your mom too. That's tricky. All right, if we haven't already, I see it's a bunch of familiar names in the room, and so I feel like we've seen a lot of you all before, but if we haven't seen you before, we're very delighted to see you. My name is Rachel Venata, and I'm joined by Kate Sweeney and Liz Chambers. We're all members of the PEAK team. That stands for Parent, Infant, Early Childhood. We work at the University of Connecticut School of Social Work, the Innovations Institute. We also have a number of researchers on our team who help us collect data and make data-informed decisions related to supporting pyramid model throughout Connecticut. And we're all, again, just happy to be here and really appreciate you all taking an hour out of your day to join us. Just briefly, I imagine this will be a review for a lot of folks, but one thing that we have also learned is that it's helpful to just kind of keep talking through this, right? What is the pyramid model? What are we talking about? What is sort of the frame for the discussion that we're having today? And so the pyramid model is a public health framework where the focus is on supporting social emotional development in young children. The bottom tier, the yellow part, is an effective workforce. And that is you all and your colleagues and peers and partners. It's difficult to implement anything without folks who really understand what they're doing. And so we can't say enough about the importance of your role in all of this. And again, just extend our appreciation for you being here to spend some time with us today. So the yellow tier is an effective workforce. Tier 1 is that blue part, and Tier 1 has two pieces: nurturing and responsive relationships and high quality supportive environments. And so again, we'll be thinking about behavior today really a lot through that responsive relationships piece of the pyramid. And one thing that we always just like to remind folks is that, there's a reason why that blue section is bigger than the orange section. Right, so really want to focus on the importance of implementing those tier 1 practices. The middle tier is targeted social emotional supports. And so this is things like help teaching kids social emotional skills in a little bit more of an explicit way, teaching friendship skills, teaching emotion identification and emotion regulation. Not every child will need really explicit instruction in how to do those things. If you think about some children who you've taught, some kids probably kind of come in knowing how to ask another child how to play. But some might need some additional support with that, right? And so, and one thing that we've noticed as well, sort of post-COVID, is that the number of children needing some additional support in those targeted social emotional strategies is a little bit bigger, I think, than it was pre-COVID. And then the top tier, the orange tier, is the intensive intervention tier. And this is the place where, again, in an ideal world, right, we've looked at tier 1 and identified that the environment is really solid and consistent and steady for the child. There are really good relationships between the adults and the child, and the adults in the room have helped facilitate relationships between the child and their peers. There's been some work at teaching social emotional skills in tier 2, and even with those things solidly in place, the child still needs some additional support in order to support their social emotional development and positive behavior in the classroom. And so tier 3 is a really individualized intervention, right? There's a plan that is very specific to the child, that the teacher, along with a whole team, including the family, comes up with to really understand what's going on for the child and what they need and how to best help their development of skills to help them navigate the situation and increase their social emotional skills. So all 3 tiers training on all three tiers of the pyramid model is, I think at this point, 30-ish hours, and we just went through it in about 3 minutes. So certainly did not get to all the details, but hopefully that gives you a good framework for sort of how we're understanding this. And want to just remind all of us of a few principles of the pyramid model. The first is that the pyramid model rests on a foundation of inclusivity, cultural responsivity, and anti-racist and anti-bias practices. If we don't have those, we're not sort of doing pyramid model, right? That is really foundational to the work. We also see social emotional development as foundational for other developmental domains. That doesn't mean it's more important, but it does mean that it really supports those other developmental domains. I think sometimes in particular we might hear from parents, well, I'm really concerned that they don't know their letters yet or that they need to know their colors. Well, if a child spends much of the day dysregulated, they're not going to be able to learn their letters or their colors. So we really have to support that social emotional development as foundational. Really connect with the idea that children need to be taught social emotional skills, just like we wouldn't expect them to just sort of learn how to read on their own or learn how to, add or subtract just kind of by osmosis and existing. Um, Children often need to be taught these social emotional skills. Behavior is communication is another principle, and that's really one that we'll be talking about a good bit today. Behavior is not the child being bad or trying to push the adult's buttons or just being a bad apple. A child's behavior, and quite frankly, adults' behavior as well, is telling us something, and we need to try to understand what is it that the child is telling us. And really, within the pyramid model, we are focusing on adult behavior. Um, Oftentimes, right, when we come to professional development or are talking about what's going on in the classroom, it can be really easy to sort of focus on the child and what does the child need to do differently. But really want to make sure that we are all on the same page, that in our pyramid model world, we're really focusing on the adult behavior. And when the adult behavior changes, the child behavior follows suit. So again, sort of shifting from, we're not only going to focus on cognitive skills or on motor skills, but we're really going to see this social emotional piece as foundational to support those other domains of development. We're not going to expect that all children naturally learn and know social emotional skills. We're not going to expect that they all just sort of learn how to regulate their emotions. Again, there are a lot of adults who have not yet learned how to regulate their emotions. It's not like that just happens when you get older, right? That's something that you really have to learn. And so we're going to be intentional and proactive about teaching strategies to support social emotional skill development. And we're going to shift from reacting to difficult behavior in the moment to really trying to think proactively. We're going to try and have proactive strategies to address what the child is telling us through their behavior. And so children communicate with us in a lot of different ways, right? They sometimes talk to us with words. They sometimes are talking to us in complete sentences. They might point to things. They might show you, what they're interested in by looking at it. They might pull on your sleeve a little bit or on your pant leg. They might cry. They might bite. They might have a tantrum, right? They might cling to a caregiver or to the one particular teacher in the room. All of these are ways in which children communicate. That behavior is not it doesn't tell us what we need to do. It's really understanding the meaning of the behavior or the function of the behavior. So the way that I think about it is, it's not like there's a biting protocol that we are here to share, right? We're like, a child bites, and here's the protocol for responding to biting because this is always what you do when a child bites. Children could be biting for a million different reasons. And so it's really understanding what it is that they're communicating through the biting, or what that behavior is, the meaning or the function of that behavior. That's what helps us to create a more effective response. And oftentimes, the behavior is either demonstrating that they want or need something or want to avoid something. And that could be, toys, it could be peers or people, or it could be like, I don't want to do something. I don't want to move from a preferred activity to a less preferred activity. And so again, we're really trying to get to a place where we're focusing on understanding what that behavior is telling us, what that function is, and that helps us to come up with how we can support the child. Um, so again, these are just sort of examples of what they might be wanting. This might not explain it all, right? But maybe it's they want an item, they want to do a certain activity, they're trying to get some attention. They're trying to get an adult response, some attention or some comfort. I think that, in terms of reframing, another thing that I like to think about as it pertains to gaining adult attention, sometimes that really is framed in a negative light, right? This kid just wants attention. Well, really what they want is connection. And so if we can think about it that way, this child is really seeking connection. How can I demonstrate connection with this child? How can I help them feel connected? I think that helps us to respond in a way that is, again, going to be more helpful, and also helps us, I think, kind of stay regulated in the moment. Or they might be sort of needing more sensory input, right? Some kids need more sensory input. Some kids need to avoid more sensory input. So they also might want to avoid, being around certain peers, or they, might be wanting to avoid teachers or other adults, avoiding a task. A lot of kids don't want to come in from outside. You're outside having a great time. It's time to transition inside to go to lunch or do whatever's next. And it can be really hard to do that. Or avoid a demand. They don't want to sit at circle time, or they don't want to sit to, sort of play the game that has been identified as the game that's going to be played. So it could be, again, it could be any of these, and it could be other things as well, but just to sort of help you think about the number of things that a child might be wanting or might be wanting to avoid. And one thing, and then I'm going to turn it over to Kate to really start talking about sort of how the adult in the room can be supportive, that we really want to emphasize is just the importance that, when we use a behavior chart, it really is just sort of like this surface thing. Is the child complying behaviorally? But it really doesn't help us understand whether or not they're learning skills that they need to be successful, whether they feel, safe in the classroom. And so there are a million reasons why we discourage the use of behavior charts, and sort of like, moving the paperclip down, or what is this called? The clothespin, down as the child has a harder day. There are a lot of reasons why we discourage that. But if for nothing else, it just really doesn't help us to understand what the need is and then to respond helpfully to that. So now I'm going to pass it over to Kate.
Thank you so much, Rachel. So as Rachel referenced several times already in this hour, a lot of the strategies around pyramid model are in service of understanding kids' behavior, but really reliant on adults. And so much so reliant on adult regulation. A lot of that sort of detective or determining work that Rachel was referencing around really understanding and interpreting the cause or meaning of a given moment of disruption in a child is only done well by a regulated adult, and done poorly or less well by a dysregulated adult. And part of what we have to acknowledge in this work is that we are in fact human as well, and so we have reactions to behavior, and different reactions to different behaviors. So much of what we'll talk about in the next little bit of time is how do we understand when we are triggered? Often we're not great barometers of ourselves. So the question um, on the screen here, how do you know if you're dysregulated, is worth just taking a moment to have folks put in the chat. What is your own internal cue? Is it not until you kind of, blow up and sort of are more reactive to someone that maybe needed a kinder moment that than was indicated, or is it do you feel yourself get flushed in your face and your neck? Are you someone that, notices that you're tense or dysregulated when you have a headache? What is your own personal cue that you're dysregulated? Feel scattered and unable to focus. Yeah, that's great insight, Alicia. Tension in my jaw. Tension in shoulders, right? So people have different sort of parts in their body that carry or signal to them to their brain that they are tense or stressed, dysregulated, and I don't feel in control, right? So all of those moments are kind of you're noticing that the threshold is breached a bit. I feel panicky. I tried all the strategies and feel stumped on what to do next. So that's a little more cognizant, right? Irritated and short, nervous, feel it in my stomach, queasy and uneasy. Yeah. So a part of this work is kind of knowing. So just like kids in behavior, we all have our own internal cues that might indicate different things. I feel overwhelmed and flooded with emotions. And so the first thing when we're thinking about anchoring adult regulation is to allow those feelings. Again, we are just humans trying to go about our day. You guys are in places, you've elected to have a job where you're in charge of a lot of small people that require a lot of you at any given time. And so you're going to have parts of that feel lovely, that moment of sharing, or that circle time moment, that moment in the dramatic play center, as someone referenced in the chat, was fun and joyful, right? And you're going to have moments where you feel any of these things. And Rachel, you can go to the next slide. A big part of this work, when we're thinking about employing strategies to understand child behavior through a pyramid model lens, is to first check our own regulation. And I'll read the quote that's here on the left to you out loud. So here's the hard part. In these moments, meaning moments when kids are dysregulated, they borrow our calm. But if we're dysregulated too, it can spiral fast. That's why co-regulation starts with us. So taking a moment, whether it be one-on-one with a given child or your own child, or in a classroom, to register where am I feeling dysregulated? Is it a level 5 or is it a 10? What do I need to do to calm down? Is not doing anything but being incredibly effective in the moment for yourself as the adult. Um, that we can't do the work of interpreting and de-escalating and supporting kids in that moment if we ourselves are dysregulated. Um, Often when people want quick answers, as Rachel said, there's no, stop biting protocol, right? If people want quick answers to problematic behavior and can feel either discouraged or confused when we first come in and focus on the adults. But that's really the key to calming the whole system. I'm not sure if many of you have heard the term. It's said often in early childhood mental health, but in order to bring the calm, we have to possess it, right? So focusing first on your own regulation or dysregulation is key. We can go to the next slide. This is a document that we have available in both English and Spanish that I think Liz is going to put in the chat, that really walks through how to do that. Because it's one thing when you're feeling tense or stressed or any of the things that you all put in the chat for someone to say, calm down. But there's not a switch, right? Even if we can do the hard work sometimes of recognizing that I feel escalated or elevated by this moment, the work of walking down those steps or de-escalating ourselves or our nervous system still has to be very intentional. So you can see here in the screen, and I'll give you all a moment to download, thanks Liz, both the English and Spanish version in the chat for yourselves. We have, a 8-step guide to sort of walk you through first recognizing yourself, so stopping in the moment, um, and remembering that you need to stay calm. Keep yourself in the moment is number one. Um, do whatever you need to access your thinking brain. So there's, uh, many different strategies within the field of mental health around this idea of, am I in my thinking brain or my reptilian brain, my sort of more responsive brain? And what do you need to do in the moment to get back your thoughts back online so that you can think through the problem that's in front of you, the problem that you're reacting to? Give your child, or the child that you're working with, a model to mirror. So that's where that co-regulation comes in. Providing co-regulation, number four, through offering physical supportive touch, if that's what works best for that child. There are some kids, and this is where, again, there's no protocol. We're not going to work ourselves out of a job because different kids are going to be calmed in different ways. Some kids are going to need more sort of physical support. Some kids are going to need a different sensory response. And so knowing what that child needs in the moment, and sometimes it's just proximity, getting yourself on the same level as them, um, reminding children of ways to calm down. Whether it's deep breathing, and you can do that class-wide or individually with a child. Often this is where structured choices can come into play. So would you rather, play with the weighted blanket, or sit with me and take 3 deep breaths, right? So you're helping them remember the skills that they've learned prior to this. Um, and then you can get into using your thinking brain, right? So it's not until step 6 that we get into kind of understanding, I know you are mad, I know you are upset, what else could we do other than throw the blocks or throw the chair, right? Um, and it's really important for kids to not be asked to justify a behavior, to explain why they did something for the first time when they're upset and dysregulated, right? So that's where the intentional teaching around these things comes into play, that this all has to be taught when you don't need it in the moment so that you can scaffold these skills and help them use them when they are dysregulated in the moment. So you can name the problem. I know you feel really upset to have to leave this center right now. Offer them solutions and then move on to an alternative activity. Um, and again, it's just intentional just to sort of break down this idea of going from escalated to calm.
Kate, I'm just going to stop sharing for 1 second and see. I see these green scribbles on the screen. I'm going to see if I
Mhm.
stop share and reshare if that helps us. Apologies for
Yeah.
the.
As you're doing that, I'm seeing a comment in the chat. Thank you. I agree that we're the ones that need to bring the calm, and I'm grateful that I work in a place that has enough staff that if we feel valued, and if I need support, that there is support there for me. It's such a huge component of the work, Lisa. So often, the pain point of overstressed staff for a range of adult reasons gets comes into play in the environment and the experience that kids have, and then kids get blamed for their behavioral responses to that. So really kind of reverse engineering that, starting first with supporting staff pays dividends in not only a child's experience but their behavior as well in the classroom or in the program. Um, Thanks, Rachel. So just moving some things around so I can see properly. Um, So this is a quote from Rumi that we thought was helpful in this idea of reframing discipline, right? So Rachel said prior to this that the idea of behavior charts are not often supportive in either understanding the reason behind a behavior or um, the experience that a child is having in the moment. Um, often when we are escalated and not registering where we are first and regulating ourselves first, it's hard to employ those other steps. And our response might lean more into discipline or blame. And so we thought that this quote was helpful here. Raise your words, not your voice. It is rain that grows flowers, not thunder. And sometimes having those little mantras or guides, just somewhere visual for you, can be helpful as a cue to remind yourself of how we want to respond in the moment. And that's often done first through regulation.
And I'm sorry, now I'm realizing I did not share my volume when I shared my
Hmm.
screen, so I'm gonna reshare one more time.
So many
Share.
steps.
So many steps. I appreciate everyone's patience. Okay, here we go.
3 reasons why punishments don't improve kids' behavior. 1, punishments don't build skills. Kids are born with all the feelings and none of the skills to manage those feelings, which is why feelings come out as bad behavior. The way to improve behavior is always to build skills, and punishments never do this. 2, punishments add shame. When we punish a kid, they feel ashamed, and shame leads to a frozen state. If a kid is in freeze, they can't learn and grow and change. 3, punishments reflect to a kid that they're a bad kid. Kids respond to the version of themselves we reflect back. That's actually how they build their identity. So we can't be saying to a kid, go to your room, what's wrong with you? And then expect them to improve their behavior. Kids have to feel good inside before they bring out that goodness as good behavior.
We're big fans of Dr. Becky's work over here. Um, any thoughts or reactions to that video? Think often, the mantra or perspective that kids that need the most gentle response often ask for it in perhaps the least gentle ways. It's true of adults as well. Um, my daughter, who now is in seventh grade, so this was a while back, but I remember when she was in her fours classroom, there were two Hudsons. Um, Liz and Rachel have heard me share this story before, but I think it's illustrative in that. And they quickly the kids started calling them Good Hudson and Bad Hudson. And Bad Hudson was not bad. Actually, he goes to middle school with Abby now. And a little active, probably more demanding of adults than than um, than the other Hudson, right? But the idea that kids had interpreted the adult response to those children as good and bad, and that was how they identified their names at such a young and early age, really demonstrates that we have to be very intentional about not labeling kids as good or bad, or their behavior as good or bad. It's just a request for help or support. And so many of these things and the strategies within pyramid model, we can know these all seem very logical and the way that humans should interact. But how do we set up sort of systems or supports like the staff support model that was referenced in the chat to really help us employ those in moments that are tense and hard, because that's when we can, as humans, forget to do that often. You see here a quote on the screen from Walter Gilliam, who is deeply involved in pyramid model and anything good with respect to social emotional work in young kids in care settings. But he talks about the power of relationships for this. And so what we hope that you leave this hour with is understanding that supporting your own regulation and focusing on relationships in the moment, both with kids and with families, is not minuscule at all. It's really an impactful way to both understand, reframe, and redirect behavior. The quote is here. So I've never seen a case where a child was expelled or suspended from a child care or preschool setting when the parents and teachers knew and liked each other, not once. So in this, what he's implying here is that there's often different responses to behavior based on perception of kids and perception of their families. And often those relationships can be facilitated by intentions from the educators and providers and system. And families can have a range of reasons why they might seem avoidant or unsure of relationships with us based on their past or personal experiences. So the importance of really leaning into multiple efforts around engagement and relationships with families that are hard. And the same way that we wouldn't want kids to be asked to explain behavior only when they're upset or dysregulated. We don't want families to only hear from us when they have to explain their kids' dysregulated behavior, right? And we know that there's such high burden on what you're able to accomplish in a day. You're not only supposed to sort of support the development of and across 6 domains for kids in care and keep them happy and healthy and well fed. But we're also asking you to reach out to their families as well, right? But what are some low burden ways, like either through tech or through a quick note, where some seeds for that relationship can be initiated and built? And luckily, NCPMI, or the National Center for Pyramid Model Innovations, has some resources to help us do that. So you'll see here on the screen a screenshot of a rather new resource that they've come out with recently. I believe that Liz is going to magically put this in the chat as well. Thank you, Liz. That gives some strategies around supporting behavior through connection. And again, there's some kids where it's easy to understand their reaction in a moment. It's easy to build a relationship with them. And there's some kids and families where it takes more concerted effort. And so while these are principles that we know are sort of common, sometimes the how to go about those can feel hard in the moment. So what this document does, and Liz just noted that there's not yet a Spanish translated version, but we'll share that once it's released, is just allow you to go through a checklist of what are some ways that I can be more intentional about building this relationship with this child and his or her family. So we'll let you download that from the chat. Another resource related to this, again, like how do we lean in closer to the kids that need more support, more co-regulation in the moment, are some recommendations around positive descriptive feedback. And this is one of the things where, if any of you are familiar with either the TPOT or Tippy Toes, which are not just cute acronyms, but they're the Fidelity classroom monitoring tool for pyramid model in infant, toddler, and preschool classrooms. It's a checklist that you'll observe that helps look at, what is the intentional sort of feedback or communication between the educators in the room and the kids. And often, you want to think about how are we, addressing those real clear things like environmental setup or de-escalation of hard moments. But often when you either through support of your director or a coach, have some intentional changes or sort of increase the volume on the number of positive descriptive feedback comments that you give to kids during the day, you'll see a lot of those other moments settle. You're really, again, this is one of the ways where if you're intentional about those moments that feel positive, then the moments that feel less so are often less frequent and can not be sort of quite as high spikes because kids again feel secure about themselves, as Dr. Becky was saying. And again, the same is true for adults. If you're having a hard day and someone walks by you in the hallway and says, "Oh, I just love your outfit today," right? Or whatever it is, some sort of compliment or some sort of form of encouragement, even if we didn't think that what we did looked as well as we wanted it to, it really helps. And often when you go into classrooms or learning environments where kids are just told what not to do, or when they're doing something that they shouldn't, that it has great impact on the environment. Liz, and again, thank you, Liz, put two additional resources in the chat. One is looking at classroom structures, and the other is looking at the same practices within family childcare homes. But it's a checklist around nurturing and responsive relationships. And again, I think, one of the things that we're grateful for the pyramid model to do is not just have these sort of large value-based things of build relationships, have healthy environments, but have a checklist and have some guidance on how and where can we be intentional about doing those things a little bit more. And so I'll let you download those from the chat, and would love to ask you if you're on a device that you can do so, to open them up, and just scroll through. And what strikes me, and again, it calls me back to the comment in the chat around staff support, because that's such a key component to this, is staff feeling valued and supported, and so that they can pour into the cups of kids, right? But under the section around creating a caring classroom community, you can see a lot of these things that, if you feel like you yourself are supported and you have the bandwidth to give more, you're going to do these things more often. And when we feel, stressed or overwhelmed, either because of what's happening in the classroom or within our own lives, these things, are often not attended to as much. And so it's a nice reflective checklist to go through either individually or with a co-teacher, to think about, how can we be intentional about building positive interactions within the daily routines, convey enthusiasm when giving positive descriptive feedback and encouragement, other things like that. So as you're looking through those documents, I would love for folks either in the chat or to go off of mute and share, what's one thing that you see from these checklists that you can, be more intentional about increasing with respect to supporting relationships with kids in your care. What's one thing that feels like it's, not too heavy of a lift to fit into tomorrow, but can, oh, Maria, go ahead. Lisa, thank you. For me, it's the reminder that behavior is communication. Yeah. And again, like that, post-its exist for a reason, like having that somewhere where, it's your visual reminder of that in the moment can often be helpful. Lisa says, for me, it's a reminder. Oh, sorry, I already read that one. The chat is flying. Take time to have a supportive conversation. Providing more opportunities for leadership, and to be helpful in the classroom is huge. Yeah, the more supportive that leadership can be of educators, and again, it goes right to kids. Communicating with families during more positive moments to build relationships. Yes. And again, just, it takes a moment, but those can be really meaningful. Danielle says to keep calm and sharing that with my child. Yeah. Alicia says, I've made at least 2 visual schedules for each of my pre-classrooms that have visuals for all transitions and activities. Wow, they include first then boards inside as well if needed, and books are available for all students. That's great. And so many of those things, like the visuals, are really helpful for students and kids to interact with and see, but it also helps you as the adult in that classroom to remember to use it. It gives you a structure for that interaction. Um, so thank you for sharing that, Alicia. Oh, Michelle, I love that. So sharing this and the video and this material with teachers at a later time to spark conversations about their struggles and what they need more support around. I'm getting the sense that you're an administrator or director, and I think just norming the idea that some parts of their job is hard and that you're open to where they would need more support is really important. Often, there can be a fear to bring up a concern, right? Liz put a link to the chat, in the chat rather, for the registration for our next Pyramid Practice Lunch and Learn. So as Rachel shared at the beginning of this hour, our intention here is just to break up what is, as Rachel said, almost a week-long training into some piecemeal content to give you all access to some of the national materials and to think about sort of one component at a time. So we started first around setting up your classroom at the beginning of the year, acknowledging the time, and we had this 2-session arc around reframing behavior. So how do we understand behavior? And then today was more about how do we respond to it. In November, we'll focus on family engagement, and then would love to hear from you all around additional topics that you would like to focus on when you think about the topic of supporting social emotional classrooms and kids in care. So if you have suggestions in that realm, please let us know. Michelle put in the chat, connection over compliance. That's beautiful. As a reminder that I say to myself often with adults and with kids. Lynn, yes, there is a place to find the last training. So we have them all recorded. I think the easiest way to get to that, since we're sort of have ambitions around an updated pyramid model site on the OEC website, is in our newsletter. So hopefully you're signed up for our newsletter. I can send out, in addition to these materials and the recording, in follow-up, a link to sign up if you haven't. And we have there a link to the previous recordings and then the upcoming ones to register for. Thanks for asking about that. Is there a more in-depth dive on adult regulation and co-regulation to support teachers as a coach? We can certainly work on that. That's a great future topic. Thanks, Michelle. And Liz, amazingly, because she has every link and resource at her fingertips at all times, already put the link to sign up for the newsletter if you're not already subscribed. So that is what we had hoped to accomplish for the content in this hour. Happy to hang on if folks have any additional comments or questions. Again, we welcome ideas around additional topics in the chat and appreciate your time today.